The North had never feared kings. It had only ever answered to one forgotten name. The old hunters never spoke those words above a whisper. They murmured them beside dying campfires, beneath skies painted with green ribbons of northern lights, where the wind carried sounds no living wolf could explain. Children were warned never to wander beyond the Frostvale forest after sunset, and every alpha was taught the same lesson before earning his first blade. Power could conquer kingdoms. Power could command armies. But power had never conquered the North. Beyond the last fortress of Blackstone Pass stretched an endless wilderness buried beneath snow older than memory itself. Towering pine forests stood frozen beneath crystal ice, their branches bending beneath the weight of endless winters. Jagged mountains pierced the clouds like ancient guardians, while rivers disappeared beneath thick sheets of glassy frost. Few dared travel there. Fewer ever returned. Those who survived always carried the same haunted look in their eyes. Some spoke of enormous footprints appearing overnight across untouched snowfields. Others claimed they had heard a roar so deep it shook frozen lakes without a single creature appearing in sight. Many returned unable to speak at all. The stories were different. The ending was always the same. The northern beast remained unconquered. 3 Alpha Kings had marched north within the last century. The first believed an army could force the creature into submission. His banners were found weeks later buried beneath snow. The soldiers were never seen again. The second carried relics blessed by the oldest priests in the kingdom. His royal wolves refused to enter Frostvale Forest. He turned back before reaching the mountain pass. The third. No one spoke his name anymore. Only his broken crown rested inside the royal crypt, untouched by dust, as a reminder that pride often froze faster than blood. Now history threatened to repeat itself. Inside Blackthorn Castle, the throne room echoed with quiet voices as nobles gathered beneath enormous stone arches carved with silver wolves and ancient runes. A map of the northern frontier stretched across a long oak table. Every mountain, every frozen river, every abandoned watchtower. Each location marked another failed expedition. King Rowan Blackwood stood silently before the map. At 29, he had already earned the respect of warriors twice his age. Tall, broad-shouldered. His black ceremonial cloak rested heavily across polished steel armor engraved with the crest of the royal wolf. Unlike many rulers before him, Rowan did not seek glory. He had spent the last 3 winters reading every report left behind by commanders who never returned from the north. Each account described the same impossible truth. The beast attacked only when provoked. Villages untouched by hunters lived peacefully for generations. Those who came seeking dominion rarely returned alive. Rowan rested one gloved hand against the edge of the table. "We end this." His voice remained calm, firm, not fueled by arrogance. By responsibility. Around him, ministers exchanged uncertain glances. General Marcus Hale folded his arms. "Your Majesty, the beast has never bowed to an alpha." Rowan looked toward the frost-covered window overlooking the distant mountains. "Then perhaps no alpha has understood what it protects." Silence followed. No one challenged him. Yet no one believed the journey would end differently. Far beyond the castle. Far beyond the villages clinging to the kingdom's northern border. Another life unfolded beneath the same winter sky. A small cottage rested beside a frozen stream surrounded by snow-covered birch trees. Smoke drifted lazily from its stone chimney. Inside, warmth battled the bitter cold pressing against wooden walls. Bundles of dried herbs hung from exposed beams. Shelves overflowed with old books, worn leather journals, and jars filled with mountain flowers gathered during the brief northern summers. Kneeling beside a wounded white fox was a young Omega named Evelyn Carter. Her long honey-blonde hair slipped over one shoulder as she carefully wrapped clean linen around the animal's injured leg. The fox trembled. "So do I." Evelyn smiled softly. "But we'll both be all right." Her sapphire blue eyes reflected the dancing firelight while gentle fingers tightened the bandage just enough to stop the bleeding without causing pain. The frightened animal slowly relaxed beneath her touch. Outside, the wind suddenly stopped. Completely. The silence arrived so suddenly it felt unnatural. Even the fire inside the stone hearth flickered uneasily. The white fox lifted its head. Its ears stood perfectly still. Then, somewhere beyond the frozen forest, a single roar rolled across the mountains. Deep, ancient, powerful enough to send loose snow falling from distant pine branches. The sound reached the cottage only as a low vibration beneath the floorboards. Evelyn froze. Not because she was afraid, but because, for reasons she could not explain, the roar did not sound like a monster. It sounded lonely. Before we journey deeper into the frozen north, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy epic Alpha King romances, ancient legends, and unforgettable stories of destiny. The roar lingered in Evelyn's mind long after the mountains had fallen silent. It was impossible. Every tale she had heard since childhood described the northern beast as a ruthless monster, an ancient creature that slaughtered hunters without mercy and shattered entire packs with a single strike. Mothers frightened restless children with stories of glowing eyes beneath the snow. Warriors sharpened their blades while boasting that one day they would bring the beast's head back to the capital. Yet none of those stories matched what she had heard. There had been no rage inside that roar. No hunger. No hatred. Only a sorrow so old it seemed to belong to the mountains themselves. The little white fox resting beside the fireplace slowly lifted its bandaged leg. It took one cautious step, then another. Finally, it nudged Evelyn's hand before disappearing through the half-open cottage door into the snow-covered woods. A gentle smile appeared across her face. There you go. She watched until the tiny white figure vanished between the birch trees. Someone knocked heavily against the wooden door. 3 sharp knocks. Then another. Evelyn opened it to find her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Miriam Holloway, wrapped in thick wool blankets, her cheeks red from the freezing wind. You heard it. It wasn't a question. Evelyn nodded. I did. Mrs. Holloway looked nervously toward the northern forest. The patrol returned this morning. They found another camp destroyed. Evelyn's expression softened. Were there survivors? Only one. The old woman's voice trembled. He wouldn't speak. They say his hair turned white overnight. A cold breeze slipped inside the cottage. Mrs. Holloway quickly closed the door behind her. The king is coming. Evelyn looked up. The Alpha King? The whole kingdom knows. The royal army is marching north. They're going to kill the beast. Silence settled between them. Mrs. Holloway expected relief. Most villagers welcomed the news. For generations they had dreamed of living without fear of the frozen wilderness beyond Frostvale Forest. Instead, Evelyn quietly looked toward the window. Snowflakes drifted peacefully through the pale afternoon light. If the beast wanted to destroy us, she said almost to herself, why has our village survived for so many generations? Mrs. Holloway frowned. Because it sleeps. Or because. Evelyn whispered. It chooses not to. The older woman stared at her. You always see kindness where no one else can. Evelyn lowered her eyes with a faint smile. Someone has to. Outside, the distant sound of horns echoed across the valley. Not hunting horns. Royal horns. Villagers poured into the main road despite the bitter cold. Children climbed wooden fences. Merchants abandoned market stalls. Doors swung open one after another as everyone rushed to witness the arrival of the king's army. Curiosity finally drew Evelyn outside. She wrapped herself in a simple gray wool cloak and followed the growing crowd toward the village square. The snow had almost stopped falling. Sunlight reflected across the frozen landscape until everything shimmered like polished crystal. Then they appeared. Rows of mounted royal guards rode through the village in perfect formation, their armor gleaming beneath the winter sun. Massive gray wolves walked beside the horses with disciplined precision, their thick coats untouched by the cold. Crimson banners bearing the silver wolf crest fluttered proudly above polished spears. Behind them came supply wagons loaded with climbing ropes, enchanted weapons, iron chains, and crates marked with ancient protective runes. No one spoke. Everyone understood what those chains were meant for. At the center of the procession rode King Rowan Blackwood. His posture remained straight despite the long journey. Snow rested lightly upon his black cloak without melting. His sharp blue-gray eyes calmly studied every road, every rooftop, every distant tree line. He looked less like a conqueror, and more like a man carrying the weight of countless lives. Evelyn watched quietly from behind the crowd. She had expected arrogance. Instead, she saw exhaustion hidden beneath quiet determination. At almost the same moment, Rowan's gaze drifted across the gathered villagers. Dozens of frightened faces. Children hiding behind their parents. Old hunters lowering their heads. Then, for only the briefest heartbeat, his eyes met Evelyn's. She did not bow immediately. She simply stood there, her honey-blonde hair moving gently in the northern wind, her sapphire blue eyes calm and unexpectedly fearless. Neither of them smiled. Neither spoke. Yet something about that silent exchange lingered long after the royal procession disappeared toward Frostvale Forest. Far beyond the village, deep within the endless wilderness, two enormous golden eyes slowly opened inside a cave carved from ancient ice. The northern beast had awakened. And somehow, it already knew she was there. Every legend begins with a choice. Some choose to hunt the unknown. Others choose to listen to it. The royal procession disappeared into Frostvale Forest before the sun reached its highest point. Snow swallowed the tracks of the horses almost as quickly as they were made, while towering pines closed behind the army like silent gates. The farther King Rowan Blackwood traveled into the northern wilderness, the quieter the world became. No birds, no wolves, not even the whisper of the wind. Only the steady crunch of boots against frozen earth. General Marcus Hale guided his gray wolf beside the king's horse. This silence isn't natural. Rowan nodded without taking his eyes from the endless trees. I know. The general rested one hand upon the hilt of his sword. Our scouts reported abandoned camps less than 2 miles ahead. Any signs of battle? Marcus shook his head. No blood. No bodies. Only broken weapons. The king's expression remained thoughtful. Broken weapons. Not broken people. It was another detail that refused to fit the stories told in the capital. Hours later, the army reached the first abandoned camp. Snow-covered tents leaned against fallen trees. Cold fire pits remained exactly where travelers had left them weeks before. Iron cooking pots still rested above frozen ashes. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing disturbed. It looked less like people had fled, and more as though they had simply walked away. Rowan dismounted. His boots pressed into untouched snow as he slowly examined the campsite. A child's wooden carving lay half-buried beside one tent. He picked it up. A small wolf, carefully carved by unsteady hands. He brushed away the snow before placing it inside his cloak. General Marcus frowned. This place should be crawling with predators. It isn't. Rowan quietly answered. His sharp eyes moved across the forest. Someone, or something, had been protecting this place. Miles away, back in the village, Evelyn prepared a basket filled with dried herbs, clean bandages, fresh bread, and small glass bottles containing herbal remedies. Mrs. Holloway watched with growing concern. You're going into the forest. Evelyn tied the basket closed. Only to the old stream. The deer often come there when they're injured. The older woman stepped closer. The king's soldiers are everywhere. I'll stay clear of them. And the beast. Evelyn hesitated. She looked toward the distant mountains where clouds gathered above snow-covered peaks. I don't think it's looking for me. Mrs. Holloway sighed. You always trust too easily. Evelyn smiled softly. Not easily. Carefully. She wrapped a gray wool cloak around her shoulders and quietly stepped into the winter afternoon. The forest welcomed her with familiar silence. Sunlight filtered through frozen branches, scattering silver patterns across untouched snow. She followed a narrow path few villagers still remembered. Every few steps she stopped. Not because she was lost. Because she listened. The forest always spoke. The crack of distant ice. The rustle of pine needles beneath snow. The faint movement of hidden animals. Today, something else lingered beneath those sounds. Pain. She couldn't explain why she felt it. Only that it pulled her deeper between the ancient trees. Meanwhile, The royal scouts advanced ahead of the main army. One young soldier suddenly raised a trembling hand. "My king!" Everyone stopped. Fresh tracks stretched across the clearing. Massive. Each footprint was nearly the width of a wagon wheel. The snow beneath them had frozen into solid ice, as though immense weight had compressed the earth itself. General Marcus slowly knelt. "They're fresh. Less than an hour old." Several soldiers instinctively reached for their weapons. One whispered a prayer. Another quietly backed away. Rowan remained calm. His eyes followed the enormous prints toward the northern cliffs. "They're alone." Marcus looked up. Alone. No smaller tracks. No hunting pack. No prey. The king spoke almost to himself. "It walks by itself. Far beyond the soldiers. Hidden between towering walls of ice." A pair of enormous golden eyes watched them without blinking. The creature remained perfectly still. Ancient white fur blended seamlessly with snow-covered stone. Its breath drifted slowly into the freezing air. It could hear every heartbeat below, every sword leaving its scabbard, every frightened whisper. Yet, it did not move. At that exact moment, miles away in another part of the forest, Evelyn suddenly stopped walking. Her hand instinctively pressed against her chest. She closed her eyes. Sometimes destiny does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it waits silently, hoping someone kind enough will follow. The white wolf never looked frightened. It stood across the frozen stream, its thick winter coat glowing beneath pale afternoon sunlight, almost blending into the snow-covered landscape. Only its brilliant silver eyes separated it from the endless white forest. Evelyn remained perfectly still. The stream between them was little more than a ribbon of ice covered by fresh snow. The wolf neither growled nor lowered its ears. Instead, it watched her with quiet patience. Almost expectantly, a cold breeze lifted strands of Evelyn's honey-blonde hair across her face. She slowly reached up, brushing them behind one ear without taking her eyes off the animal. "Are you hurt?" The question escaped almost instinctively. The wolf tilted its head. Then, without making a sound, it turned toward the deeper forest. It took several graceful steps before stopping again. Looking back. Waiting. Evelyn should have returned home. Every lesson she had ever learned warned against following strange wolves into Frostvale Forest. Every sensible thought urged her to leave. Yet something deep inside her refused. Not because she trusted the wolf. Because she trusted the feeling growing quietly within her heart. The same feeling she had experienced when the distant roar echoed through the mountains. Sadness. Loneliness. Hope. She adjusted the basket hanging from her shoulder and carefully crossed the frozen stream. The wolf resumed walking, always keeping the same distance. Never rushing. Never disappearing from sight. As though making certain she could follow. Far to the north, King Rowan and his soldiers continued tracking the enormous footprints winding through frozen valleys. The deeper they ventured, the stranger the forest became. Towering pines gave way to ancient stone pillars half buried beneath snow. Massive ruins emerged between cliffs, their surfaces covered in faded carvings older than the kingdom itself. General Marcus dismounted beside one weathered monument. "My king, you should see this." Rowan stepped closer. Ice covered most of the ancient carving. He removed one leather glove and brushed away centuries of frozen snow. A mural slowly appeared beneath his hand. Several wolves. One enormous beast. And standing before it. Not an alpha warrior. Not a king. A young woman. She held no weapon. No crown. Only one hand resting gently against the creature's forehead. Marcus frowned. "That makes no sense." Rowan remained silent. Below the figures, ancient symbols stretched across the stone. The royal scholars accompanying the expedition examined them carefully. One elderly historian slowly inhaled. "I recognize this language." Everyone turned. "It predates every known kingdom. Can you read it?" The old man hesitated. Only one sentence. His trembling fingers followed the weathered inscription. "Strength commands obedience." He paused. But only compassion earns remembrance. Silence settled over the ruins. Marcus laughed uneasily. "Old legends. Nothing more. Yet Rowan did not answer. His eyes remained fixed upon the carved woman. Somehow, she reminded him of someone. Meanwhile, Evelyn followed the white wolf higher into the mountains. The familiar forest gradually disappeared. Ancient cedar trees replaced the younger pines. Great walls of blue ice rose around narrow paths untouched by human footsteps. The air became colder, yet strangely peaceful. At last, the wolf stopped before the entrance to a vast cavern hidden beneath layers of frozen vines. It looked toward Evelyn one final time, then quietly disappeared inside. For a brief moment, fear returned. Evelyn tightened her grip on the basket. Her heartbeat echoed inside the silence. She could still turn back. No one would know she had ever come here. But then, a faint sound drifted from within the cave. Not a growl, not a roar. A low, strained breath, like someone trying very hard not to cry out in pain. Without another thought, Evelyn stepped inside. The cavern stretched farther than she could see. Walls of crystal ice reflected soft blue light across the frozen floor. Ancient stone pillars supported a ceiling glittering with countless icicles. Everything shimmered with an almost sacred beauty. Then she saw it. Near the center of kindness has a language older than kingdoms. Even the oldest wounds remember its sound. For several long moments, neither Evelyn nor the northern beast moved. The cavern seemed to hold its breath with them. Tiny drops of melted ice fell from the ceiling, echoing softly across the crystal floor. Pale blue light shimmered through the frozen walls, wrapping the enormous creature in an almost ethereal glow. Up close, it was even larger than the stories had claimed. Its shoulders rose higher than a warhorse. Thick white fur, once magnificent, was tangled with frost and dust from centuries of imprisonment. Massive iron chains engraved with ancient runes wrapped around its forelegs and neck, disappearing beneath slabs of broken stone. Several silver spears remained lodged deep beneath its shoulder, their shafts cracked but still holding the enchanted blades inside its flesh. Every slow breath caused the heavy chains to rattle. Every exhale carried pain. Evelyn's heart tightened. "So," she whispered gently, "you've been suffering all this time." The beast blinked slowly. Its brilliant golden eyes never left hers. There was intelligence within them. Not the instinct of a wild animal. The quiet awareness of someone who had witnessed countless generations rise and disappear. Evelyn slowly knelt several yards away. She did not rush closer. She knew frightened creatures needed patience more than courage. Opening her basket, she removed clean linen, herbs, and a small clay bottle filled with mountain salve. "I don't know if this will help." A faint smile touched her lips. "But I'd like to try." The beast remained perfectly still. Even its breathing softened. Carefully, step by step, Evelyn approached. Each movement was slow enough to give the creature every opportunity to stop her. It never did. When she finally stood beside its enormous foreleg, she could clearly see the deepest wound. One of the silver spearheads had pierced between thick muscles, leaving the surrounding fur darkened by old blood long frozen into the white coat. The flesh around it looked inflamed, angry, as though the enchanted metal refused to let the wound heal. Evelyn reached toward the shaft, then hesitated. "This will hurt." The beast lowered its head slightly, almost as if giving permission. She inhaled deeply. "All right." Wrapping both hands around the broken spear, Evelyn gently tested its movement. The beast flinched. A low rumble vibrated through the cavern. Not threatening. Simply pain. "I'm sorry." She paused immediately. "I'm so sorry." She waited until its breathing steadied again. Only then did she try once more. Slowly, patiently, with one careful pull, the silver spear slid free. Dark crimson stained the ice beneath them. The beast's body tensed, powerful muscles trembling beneath its thick fur, yet it made no attempt to strike. Instead, it lowered its massive head until its forehead rested against the frozen ground. A single exhausted breath escaped its chest. Relief. Evelyn quickly pressed clean linen against the wound before applying the herbal salve. The scent of pine resin, lavender, and mountain herbs filled the cold air. She gently wrapped the injury with long strips of cloth. The bandage looked impossibly small against such an enormous body. Yet she secured it with the same care she had shown the little white fox. There. She stepped back. That should make it easier. The beast slowly lifted its head. Its golden eyes softened. Then, without warning, it leaned forward. Evelyn froze. The creature's enormous nose stopped only inches from her face. Warm breath drifted across her cheeks. For one quiet heartbeat, it simply breathed her in, as though searching for a memory hidden beneath her scent. Outside the cavern, snow suddenly fell from nearby cliffs. King Rowan's expedition had reached the upper mountain pass. One scout rushed toward the king. "My lord, we found tracks." "Fresh?" Marcus asked. The scout swallowed. "They're not alone." "What do you mean?" The young soldier pointed toward the snow-covered slope ahead. "There are two sets. One belongs to the beast, and the other," he hesitated, "belongs to a human." Rowan's expression hardened. "A hunter?" The scout slowly shook his head. "No, the footprints are much smaller." The king's heartbeat quickened for reasons he could not explain. "Find them. No one draws near that creature alone." Back inside the cavern, the northern beast gently closed its eyes. A faint golden light flickered beneath the ancient runes embedded in the broken chains around its neck. The symbols had been dark for centuries. Now, one of them had begun to glow. The oldest chains are never forged from iron alone. Some are bound by forgotten promises. The faint golden glow beneath the ancient runes spread slowly across the beast's enormous collar. One symbol, then another. Each line of the forgotten script shimmered beneath centuries of frost, illuminating the cavern with a soft amber light that danced across the frozen walls. Evelyn stepped back instinctively. "What?" The beast remained perfectly still. Its breathing had become steadier now that the silver spear was gone. The deep wound along its shoulder no longer bled freely, and the herbs she had pressed against the torn flesh filled the air with the scent of pine and wild lavender. Yet something far stranger than healing was unfolding. The glowing runes continued to awaken, one after another, until they formed an unbroken circle around the beast's neck. Suddenly, a sharp pain flashed through Evelyn's head. She gasped, placing one hand against her temple. The cavern disappeared. For a heartbeat, she no longer saw ice or stone. Instead, she stood beneath an endless night sky filled with shimmering green auroras. Snow drifted gently across an ancient valley unlike any place she had ever known. A young woman dressed in flowing white robes stood before the same magnificent beast. She looked almost impossibly familiar. The same honey-blonde hair. The same sapphire blue eyes. The woman rested her hand against the creature's forehead. Then she smiled. "You are never meant to kneel." Her voice echoed through the vision. "You are meant to guard." The beast lowered its head with quiet affection. Not obedience. Trust. The vision dissolved. Evelyn staggered backward, catching herself against a pillar of ice. Her heartbeat thundered inside her chest. "What was that?" she whispered. The beast slowly opened its golden eyes again. This time, there was recognition within them. Not because it knew her. Because it remembered someone who looked exactly like her. Far outside the cavern, King Rowan's expedition continued climbing toward the northern cliffs. Fresh snowfall had nearly erased the smaller human footprints. Nearly. One of the royal trackers crouched low beside a narrow mountain path. "My king." Rowan dismounted immediately. "What have you found?" The tracker pointed toward delicate impressions preserved beneath the overhanging rocks. "A woman." Marcus frowned. "How can you tell?" "The stride. The weight. And—" he gently brushed away loose snow. "She isn't running." Everyone fell silent. Not running. Walking. Whoever had entered these mountains had done so willingly. Marcus looked toward the towering cliffs ahead. No ordinary villager would come this far. Rowan studied the footprints for several long moments. Then he noticed something unusual. Beside every human footprint appeared the faint prints of a wolf. Smaller than the beast. Large enough to belong to no ordinary animal. Walking beside her. Not chasing. Guarding. His expression changed. Someone is leading her. Without another word, Rowan mounted his horse. We move now. Deep inside the frozen sanctuary, Evelyn gathered her basket again. She reached for another clean bandage. The beast quietly watched every movement. Its enormous ears twitched as distant vibrations traveled through the mountain. Someone was approaching. The creature slowly lifted its head. Its gaze turned toward the cavern entrance. The calm inside its eyes vanished. Every muscle beneath its white coat tightened. Not with anger, with caution. It could hear armored boots striking stone, metal against ice, voices echoing through narrow tunnels. The royal expedition had entered the mountain. Evelyn heard them too. At first, only faint echoes, then clearer. Search every passage. Marcus's command rolled through the cavern. No one leaves these tunnels unseen. Her eyes widened. The king. The beast rose carefully onto all four legs. Despite its injuries, it towered over everything around it. Broken chains dragged across the frozen floor with a thunderous metallic roar. The entire mountain trembled. Large cracks raced across nearby sheets of ancient ice. Instinctively, Evelyn stepped closer instead of retreating. It's all right. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I won't let them hurt you. The beast looked down at her. For one impossibly quiet heartbeat, the ancient guardian lowered its massive head until its forehead almost touched hers. Then, without warning, a single word echoed inside Evelyn's mind. Not spoken aloud, not heard with her ears. Felt. Ancient. Powerful. Waiting across countless centuries. One forgotten name. So close to being remembered. Just beyond the edge of her memory. The mountain did not tremble because a king had arrived. It trembled because an ancient promise was about to awaken. The echo of armored footsteps rolled through the frozen passages. Closer. Steadier. Every strike of iron against stone reverberated across the cavern like the ticking of an ancient clock counting down toward an inevitable meeting. Evelyn looked toward the tunnel entrance. The beast did not. Its golden eyes remained fixed on her. Calm. Patient. As though the approaching soldiers mattered far less than the frightened young woman standing before it. Another pulse of golden light spread beneath the rune-covered collar. The symbols glowed brighter. The ancient chain shivered. Not from force. From recognition. A sudden gust of icy wind swept through the cavern, extinguishing the small lantern hanging from Evelyn's basket. Darkness rushed in. Only the blue light trapped within the crystal walls and the warm golden glow of the awakening runes remained. Then, the voice returned. Not through the air. Inside her heart. Soft. Ancient. Remember. Evelyn gasped. I don't know how. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to understand. She wanted to remember. But every time the forgotten word reached the edge of her thoughts, it vanished like snow melting beneath sunlight. The beast slowly lowered its head again. Its enormous forehead rested only inches from hers. A memory flashed. Not one. Many. Hands resting upon snowy fur. Children laughing beneath green northern lights. A valley untouched by war. An enormous white guardian walking beside people who feared nothing because they trusted one another. Then came fire. Steel. Chains. Screams. The memory shattered before she could grasp them. Outside, King Rowan reached the mouth of the hidden cavern. He raised one hand. The soldiers halted immediately. Cold air drifted from the opening like the breath of an ancient world long forgotten. General Marcus drew his sword. My king, this place wasn't made by nature. Stone pillars carved with wolves and unfamiliar symbols surrounded the entrance. The elderly historian stepped forward, his face pale. I've read about this sanctuary. No one believed it existed. Rowan studied the weathered carvings. Again, every mural showed the same impossible truth. The guardian. A young woman. No weapons. No alpha beside her. Only trust. Marcus tightened his grip on the sword. Whatever is inside. We finish it today. Rowan did not answer immediately. Instead, he noticed something else. Fresh footprints. Small. Light. Leading into the sanctuary. Not a single footprint led back out. His heartbeat quickened. She's still inside. Without another word, Rowan entered the cavern. The soldiers followed. Deep within the sanctuary, the beast suddenly lifted its head. Its ears turned toward the approaching echoes. Its breathing deepened. Not with fury, with resolve. Evelyn instinctively placed one hand against its massive neck. "It's all right," she whispered. "I'm here." The beast closed its eyes for a brief moment. Then, something impossible happened. One of the ancient iron chains cracked. A sharp metallic sound echoed through the cavern. Another crack followed. The glowing rune burned brighter. Not because the beast was forcing the chains apart, because the enchantment itself was weakening. Evelyn stared in disbelief. "I didn't." She stopped. Had she done this? No. She had only removed a spear, bandaged a wound, offered kindness. Yet every act of compassion seemed to unravel magic that centuries of strength had failed to break. The first soldiers appeared at the far end of the chamber. Torches illuminated the frozen sanctuary. Gasps echoed immediately. "There it is. The northern beast. Ready your weapons." Steel rang as dozens of swords left their scabbards. Archers raised enchanted bows. The beast slowly stood to its full height. Broken chains dragged behind it across the frozen floor. Towering, majestic, terrifying. Several young soldiers instinctively stepped backward. General Marcus raised his sword. "Fire if it moves." "No." The cry escaped Evelyn before she even realized she had spoken. Every head turned toward her. She stood alone between the royal army and the ancient guardian. Her gray cloak fluttered in the cold wind pouring through the cavern. Her hands trembled, but she did not move aside. Marcus stared in disbelief. "Girl, get away from it. It will kill you." Evelyn slowly shook her head. "It hasn't. It could have. 100 times. But it didn't." The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. King Rowan finally stepped through the ranks. The moment he saw Evelyn standing before the wounded beast, he stopped. Their eyes met once again, just as they had in the village. Only now there was no crowd, no distance, only silence. Then Rowan noticed the blood-stained bandages wrapped around the beast's shoulder, the discarded silver spear lying nearby, the open basket of herbs. The answer became painfully clear. She hadn't come to conquer the northern beast. She had come to save it. Before anyone could speak, the golden light surrounding the beast suddenly surged through the cavern. A forgotten name rose once more inside Evelyn's mind. This time, she could almost hear every syllable. Almost. One breath away from being remembered. Some names are spoken with the lips. Others are remembered by the soul long before the voice can find them. The golden light flooded every corner of the frozen sanctuary. It shimmered across crystal walls, reflected through ancient pillars, and transformed the cavern into a cathedral of living ice. The air itself seemed to vibrate as the forgotten runes carved into the beast's chains awakened one after another. Every soldier instinctively shielded their eyes. General Marcus raised his sword. "Loose your arrows." No one moved. The archers remained frozen. Not because they disobeyed, because something inside the cavern told every living creature to be still. King Rowan slowly stepped forward. His gaze never left Evelyn. She stood between the royal army and the ancient guardian with nothing in her hands except a basket of herbs. No armor, no weapon, no fear. The beast towered behind her like a mountain wrapped in white fur. One swipe of its massive paw could have destroyed the entire front line. Instead, it stood perfectly motionless, watching only her. The golden light intensified. Another wave of memories crashed into Evelyn's mind. Snow-covered valleys, children running beside giant white wolves, ancient songs carried beneath emerald skies. Then, a circle of men wearing crowns, iron chains, silver spears. A frightened guardian refusing to fight even as it was betrayed. Tears rolled silently down Evelyn's cheeks. "No," she whispered. "You weren't hunting them." Another memory answered. The beast standing before countless terrified villagers, protecting them from something hidden beyond the northern mountains. Not attacking, guarding. Everything the kingdom believed. had been wrong. The beast had never been the monster. It had been the shield. General Marcus finally broke the silence. My king, this creature has bewitched the girl. We must strike before no. Rowan's voice echoed sharply across the cavern. The single word halted every soldier. Marcus stared at him. My king, look. Rowan pointed quietly toward the beast. Everyone followed his gaze. The enormous guardian had not taken one aggressive step. Its head remained lowered. Its breathing calm. Its wounded shoulder still wrapped in clean linen. There was only one weapon inside the sanctuary. Fear. And it belonged to the humans. The elderly historian slowly approached one of the glowing pillars. His trembling hands brushed across newly illuminated symbols. They're changing, he whispered. The inscription. It wasn't complete before. He carefully translated each ancient line. The guardian shall never kneel before strength. Another line emerged beneath the light. The guardian shall answer only the voice of the first keeper. Silence consumed the cavern. Marcus frowned. The first keeper? The old scholar slowly turned toward Evelyn. His face had become completely pale. I thought they were myths. The keepers. They were never Alpha Kings. The beast suddenly closed its eyes. A deep vibration rolled through the mountain. Not a roar. A call. Gentle. Patient. The same sound Evelyn had heard on the night the mountains first spoke to her. The forgotten word returned again. Closer now. Clearer. She could almost taste each ancient syllable. Her heart raced. I know you, she whispered through tears. I've heard this before. Not in this life. Somewhere older. Far older. The beast slowly leaned its forehead toward her once again. The golden light surrounding the ancient chains flowed upward, circling Evelyn like warm sunlight breaking through winter clouds. She closed her eyes. Another voice. This one softer. A woman's voice. Almost identical to her own. If the world forgets, it whispered, our promise will remain. The final barrier inside Evelyn's memory shattered. A single name rose from the deepest corner of her soul. Not learned. Remembered. Her lips trembled. Every soldier unconsciously held their breath. Even King Rowan felt his heartbeat slow. The beast opened its golden eyes. Not with expectation. With hope. The hope of someone who had waited through centuries of endless winters. Evelyn finally understood. This was never about controlling the northern beast. Never about defeating it. Never about proving strength. It had waited. Not for the strongest alpha. Not for the greatest king. But for one gentle soul willing to see beyond fear. Her lips parted. The ancient name stood waiting upon the edge of a single breath. Before the first sound could leave her mouth, the beast slowly bent one massive front leg. Then the other. Its enormous body lowered toward the frozen ground before the entire royal army. Not in surrender. Not to the king. Only to the girl whose voice had already reached its heart long before she spoke its true name. A true name is never a weapon. It is an act of recognition. The ancient guardian remained kneeling. Not one soldier dared breathe. The silence inside the frozen sanctuary became almost sacred, broken only by the soft crackling of glowing runes and the distant dripping of melting ice. Every eye rested upon Evelyn. Every heartbeat seemed to wait for the same impossible moment. King Rowan slowly lowered his sword. The sound of steel sliding back into its scabbard echoed gently through the cavern. General Marcus turned in disbelief. My king, if she speaks that creature's spell, it isn't a spell. Rowan interrupted quietly. His gaze never left the young woman standing before the ancient beast. It's remembering her. Marcus opened his mouth to argue. No words came, because deep inside his own heart, he knew it was true. Nothing about the guardian resembled a monster preparing to attack. Everything about it resembled someone finally finding the one person it had spent centuries waiting for. Evelyn reached out with trembling fingers. Slowly, carefully, she rested her hand upon the beast's enormous forehead. Its thick white fur felt warm despite the frozen air surrounding them. The moment their skin touched, the forgotten name became clear. Not whispered by another voice. Not revealed by magic. It rose naturally from the deepest place inside her soul. She smiled through quiet tears. I remember. The beast closed its eyes. Evelyn inhaled softly. Then, for the first time in countless generations, the sacred name was spoken aloud. Asterion. The sound drifted gently through the sanctuary. It was not loud. Yet every crystal wall answered. Every glowing rune blazed like a rising dawn. The mountain itself seemed to awaken. A wave of warm golden light burst outward from the guardian. The ancient chain shattered. Not explosively. Gracefully. One by one, each iron link dissolved into shimmering particles that floated upward like snowflakes caught in sunlight. The heavy collar around Asterion's neck split apart before crumbling into dust across the frozen floor. No force had broken the enchantment. The enchantment had fulfilled its purpose. The oldest promise had finally been completed. Asterion slowly rose to its full height, no longer burdened by chains, no longer carrying centuries of captivity. Its magnificent white coat seemed brighter, its golden eyes clearer, its posture proud. The soldiers instinctively stepped backward, not because they feared an attack, because they stood before something ancient beyond imagination. The guardian looked down at Evelyn first. Then, it turned toward King Rowan. For several long moments, neither king nor guardian moved. At last, Asterion inclined its enormous head, a gesture of acknowledgement. Not submission. Respect. Rowan answered by placing one fist over his heart. The gesture belonged neither to kings nor warriors. It belonged to equals. General Marcus stared in stunned silence. So every legend, he whispered, was wrong. The elderly historian slowly shook his head. No, they were simply told by those who forgot the ending. Outside, the mountains responded. Across the northern wilderness, wolves emerged from forests they had abandoned for generations. White foxes appeared along frozen rivers. Great eagles circled above icy cliffs. The endless silence that had haunted the north for centuries quietly disappeared. Life returned, as though the land itself had been holding its breath. Inside the sanctuary, Rowan finally approached Evelyn. He stopped several steps away, close enough to see the tears drying upon her cheeks, close enough to notice the exhaustion hidden behind her gentle smile. You knew its name. She slowly looked at him. I remembered it. There was a difference. And somehow, he understood. You crossed these mountains alone. Rowan's voice carried neither accusation nor authority. Why? Evelyn glanced back toward Asterion. Its golden eyes reflected endless winters and endless patience. Because pain should never be faced alone. The answer settled deeply inside Rowan's heart. Not as admiration. As truth. He had spent years believing strength protected kingdoms. Now, standing before the freed guardian, he realized compassion had accomplished what every Alpha King had failed to do. The northern wind swept gently through the open cavern. Sunlight poured inside for the first time in centuries. It illuminated Evelyn, Rowan, and Asterion together. Not as conqueror, not as captive, not as savior, but as three lives brought together by a promise older than memory itself. Far above the sanctuary, the emerald northern lights slowly spread across the daytime sky. And somewhere beyond the mountains, ancient voices whispered with quiet joy. The first keeper had returned, not to rule the north, but to remind the world that even the wildest heart will bow not to power, but to kindness.